Hello and welcome to Flower of Light podcast number 5, which is the unification of the two lands. So basically what we did today was, again, I'm joined by Charlotte and Christine.
Hello, good day to everybody.
Hi Christine, hi Charlotte. So today myself, Charlotte and Christine went up to Tara in County Meath, and the reason for that is because we were commemorating an event that took place that I ran in 2012. So I just want to read out the article that I wrote. It's only very short, that I wrote for that event. So it says, on the 30th of September 2012, a group of remembered souls gathered for the unification of the two lands, Ireland and Egypt. The Stargate portal was once again opened, connecting the great central sun with the centre of our galaxy and with our Earth, awakening the ancient land of Eire and all her beautiful souls, uniting spirit and matter. A quantum leap takes place as we step through the gateway, moving us once again into universal and galactic conscious awareness, coming full circle. We ascend to descend and descend to ascend. Alchemy, the sacred science of enlightenment and immortality. This is what happens in between these two phases. Our golden octahedron spins faster than the speed of light, weaving a crystalline consciousness network, allowing the information to flow from above and below, subconscious to conscious. The memory of Atlantis Ireland-Eire has been reactivated, and a unity consciousness is being born. The information will come flooding back, just as it was washed away in the flood. So shall it return in a flood of super consciousness. Wake up now and remember who you are. You are the masters of wisdom, the record keepers, the people of Atlantis-Eire. So,
very well said.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, the reason, as you can read or hear from that I did that event was to connect the lands of Ireland and Egypt, and just, pretty briefly in this podcast to say that it's pretty well known that the knowledge and information in Egypt was a legacy that was handed down by an older civilization, and there's been a lot of speculation as to what that older civilization was. And from my research and from what I know, that older civilization was Atlantis. And specifically, of course, Atlantis-Eire, Atlantis, Ireland. So I have talked before about the Book of Coming Forth by Light. And there is another name for the Book of Coming Forth by Light, which is also called the Book of Thoth. The Book of Thoth and the Book of Coming Forth by Light basically contain or transmit the same information. And that information is written in a language, as we discussed before, which is a language of geometry, shape and form. And that language is a language that communicates directly to your DNA and to your higher self. It's the language of ascension, and it's the language of resurrection. And it's the language by which we can ascend out of the third dimension. This is the knowledge that was known in the ancient world. This is what was known in Atlantis-Eire, and it is the most powerful knowledge, the most powerful information, because it communicates to our higher self, to our subconscious, to our DNA, to our intuition, to the part of us that knows. It communicates that we are immortal and ageless and timeless. And even though when you say that it doesn't sound so much, but when you think about it, to be immortal, ageless and timeless, that is actually a very powerful concept. So everything, sorry?
Definitely.
Yeah. Everything everything that holds us back or cripples us today really is born out of fear. And that's the biggest obstacle that everybody has, is fear. And if we could remove that fear by knowing that we are immortal, we are ageless, we are timeless, and that nothing in this 3D illusion, if you like, can actually do us any harm. You know, in actual fact, we can't die. And that's the biggest fear that everybody has, is the fear of death. So what has that got to do with the event that I ran on the 30th of September in 2012? Well, let me just backtrack a bit. Before I was organising that event, I was actually over in Egypt, in the Flower Light Centre in Egypt. And I had what you'd call a vision. And it was a vision of two people. I'm not going to get into all the details of it anyway, but in the vision I'm looking for something, and I'm going in and out of different places, and when I go into certain places I'm in Egypt, and when I come back out I'm in Ireland. And I'm actually looking for something, but I don't know what I'm looking for. And I'm approached by this person, an old man actually, and he's given me some bread to eat, and he's telling me, you know, take this bread, it's the most beautiful bread you've ever tasted. And I'm arguing with him and basically telling him I don't want the bread, that I've tasted it loads of times in Egypt. And he's telling me, no, take this bread, it's the most beautiful bread. And so I eventually take the bread from the man, and it's the bread itself that kind of makes me goof off, is the only expression I can come up with.
How does that translate? I don't understand what you mean by goof. Does it mean you had a vision, or
no? It's
as
like
if you were taking ayahuasca or something, going on a journey.
Yeah. It's
so
like when I eat the bread, I'm in one place, and then I get so engrossed in the idea that, oh my God, this bread is so gorgeous, and
you kind of lose track of yourself.
I lose track of myself, and when I come back around again, I'm somewhere else.
So it's like a trigger.
Yeah, like the bread, I suppose, transported me somewhere in a way.
Exactly. Like I very much, like I've said to you before, like Alice in Wonderland in the book, where she eats something and it takes her to a new place. Takes her somewhere else.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So that's more or less the way the bread. Yeah, that's the way the bread acted. And so it's this old man anyway that's given me the bread. So when I come around, if you like, and the next place that I'm in, I'm about to kind of give in and take something that I don't want, because remember, I was looking for something.
You didn't really want the bread, you were looking for something else.
Didn't know what I was looking for, but anyway, so
but you knew what you didn't want.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I did. Yeah. So anyway, after I've eaten the bread and I find myself somewhere else, I'm just about to take something that I didn't want, and I heard a voice of a person calling me, and I turn around, and it's a woman, and she's standing behind what's like a delicatessen counter, and she opens the counter, and inside the counter is all these most beautiful cakes, and almost like a nice sculpture, but it's a cake, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's it's made like swans. The cakes were made like swans, into swans.
Wow.
And they had all these beautiful like fruits and colours of fruits that I'd never seen before. But I remember looking into the counter and looking at all the cakes, and there was so many of them, you know. Mm-hmm. And I said to this woman who was just smiling at me, and I just said to her, which one is for me? And she just looked at me and smiled, and she said to me, they're all yours. They're all for you. So the reason I'm telling you that is because, as I mentioned, that happened over in Egypt, that vision of those two people, you know, the man who gave me the bread and the woman who had the cakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Or who was giving me the cakes. And so that it is actually connected to the Tara event, because I discovered who the woman was a couple of months later. I was watching a YouTube video.
While you were in Egypt, right?
While I was still in Egypt, yeah. I was watching a YouTube video one evening, and the power drops in Egypt all the time. You know, it cuts out in Egypt all the time as well. I mean, they say when they discovered Tutankhamun, the power went out in Cairo.
Wow.
Well, that's nothing unusual. The power goes out all the time.
Yeah.
It goes out. I mean, I remember during the revolution of Mubarak and Mohammed Morsi even, the power went out about 10 times a day. So, like, it's not anything unusual, you know, or connected to a curse or anything like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the power dropped as I was watching this YouTube video. And it was actually Project Camelot I was watching, and there was an old woman being interviewed, and I was thinking, like, the reason that I even clicked into the video was because I was saying, why has this old woman been
interviewed
on Project Camelot? No offence to say old woman, but Project Camelot, for anybody who watches it, is more like kind of young whistleblowers and things like that.
Yeah.
So this woman just looked out of place. So when I clicked into the video, I watched it for a while, and as I said, the internet dropped. There was a power surge, and the video just froze on this woman's face. This was about 6 months after I'd had this vision of the bread man and the cake woman. So it was only when the video froze on this woman's face that I looked, and it was her eyes, because the woman I saw in my vision was young, a lot younger than the woman I saw on the video, but I knew it was the same woman. It was her eyes.
Right.
And that woman turned out to be Delores Cannon.
Yes.
So that was quite amazing, and I ended up meeting Delores, and I ended up
the only ever time she came to Ireland.
Only time she came to Ireland, yeah. Which was unique in itself.
That you were here as well.
Yeah, and I actually only saw the event that she was running at Newgrange 2 days before.
And
she was actually here.
And it was sold out, actually, at that time.
It was sold out, yeah.
When you met her, that was how long after you discovered that it was her?
She was connected.
Egypt,
I think that was about...
was it a year?
Maybe a year or 2 years.
So then
year and a half.
After a year, you went to Ireland again, did you?
I think approximately. I'm not 100%. Yeah, between a year and two, I think.
Yeah.
From the time of having the vision and then actually meeting her.
Just for the timeline.
Yeah. About a year, between a year and 2 years, I'd say.
Yeah, cool.
And I was actually home in Ireland for the revolution. And a friend of mine in England had been out at the crop circle symposium, and she fell in a crop circle and broke her hip.
Yeah.
But she rang me. I was staying in my mother-in-law's house, and she rang me, my friend who was living in Glastonbury actually at the time. And she rang me and asked me to look on a website called the Crop Circle Connector. And she wanted me to look at the website, at a picture of the crop circle that she had fallen in. And so she was on the other end of the phone, and I was saying to her, which one is it? I'm looking at this one. And she was saying to me, no, scroll down. So eventually got to the crop circle that she had actually fallen in. And as I was looking at the crop circle, it just caught my eye peripherally over the crop circle was a banner ad for Delores Cannon, who was going to be at Newgrange in 2 days' time. Now, my mother-in-law's house wasn't that far from Newgrange, but the only thing was I hadn't got a ticket.
Right.
So it didn't matter. I mean, I was going anyway,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I eventually met Delores, and it turned out that I ended up meeting her at Newgrange and going into the mound, at Newgrange with Delores, which was quite an experience. And the interesting thing, which is kind of a bit of a side note, and one of my friends, when I was telling her about the vision that I had about Delores, and after I realised who Delores was, who the woman in my vision was, I was telling my friend, that in the vision she was giving me all these cakes. And my friend said to me, wouldn't it be amazing if when you met her, when you met Delores, that she was actually eating cream cakes, which I thought was kind of, a bit silly at the time. But as it turned out,
Meanwhile,
the day I went to Newgrange to meet Delores, she was actually downstairs in the visitor centre. And as I mentioned, I hadn't got a ticket, but the organiser was, on the day, trying to get me in, which I did get in the end because one person cancelled, believe it or not.
Yes.
So I got in and had a ticket. But I went down to see Delores. The girl told me she was down in the visitor centre, so I went down to see her. She was there with her daughter. And as I approached her and walked up to the table, she was sitting with her daughter, 2 cups of coffee and 2 big, huge cream cakes. Which as I said, a side note, which I thought
that's a sanction right there. The universe is like, you're in the right place.
It's quite amusing because cakes connect me with my dad, and actually so does bread. So even though it's funny, the whole idea of the cakes and the bread, it actually has a deeper. It does have.
Well, it also connects to Egypt as well.
Yeah,
like the Osiris cake, right? They
and
ate the bread.
Osiris bread. Yeah,
bread.
Yeah. So it does, and no, I'm not going to get into it anyway. Yeah, so it does. It has a much deeper connection.
But the bread man.
But the bread man.
Right.
So this brings me to why we went to Tara today. as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I ran that event in 2012, and it was just after that vision that I'd had, which I, had in between. The timeline kind of escapes me, to be honest. But I had discovered who Delores was, but I was still wondering who the bread man was.
Yeah, exactly.
So I came home for the 2012 event. I got an email from a couple of people that were organising the event for me in Ireland.
Yes.
Because I was over in Egypt. And they sent me an email saying that this woman had contacted them, saying that she wanted to contact me.
Yeah.
So the organiser said to me, would you send this woman an email? They gave me her email address. Now, I instantly thought that was kind of odd, that if she wanted to contact me, why didn't she just send me an email?
Yeah, directly to you, yeah.
Rather than contact the organisers, get the organisers to send me her email and then have me email her.
Yeah.
Which I thought was odd, but I emailed her anyway. And, intuitively it turned out to be right, but... so I emailed her and she replied basically telling me that her husband had given her a message telling her that there was a woman who was living in Egypt and who was Irish and who was connecting Egypt and Ireland, and who knew information that she needed to find out.
Yes.
And that she needed to come to this woman because apparently I had some information
that she needed, that he wanted her to connect with.
Yeah. So I emailed her and she replied to me, and she told me that, her husband had told her that I was
the person to be
I was key to what was happening.
Yes.
To connect Egypt and Ireland, which, to be honest, I already knew anyway. So she sent me her website. Sorry, I just have to take a drink there. She sent me her website, which I didn't actually click into the first day she sent me the email, if you like.
Yeah.
It was probably about a week later. And when I clicked into her website, I realised that her husband, the person that she said she had gotten a message from, now her husband was actually quite a famous paranormal researcher and medium in England. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so he had passed on. He had already passed at this stage. And this woman herself was doing work, I suppose, on behalf of her, messages that she was receiving
from
her husband. Yeah. So when I looked onto her website and I saw a picture of her husband,
the bread man,
I realised he was the bread man. But he didn't look, I recognised him, not how he physically looked on the picture of their website, but I recognised his energy, if you like. I knew it was him. Mm-hmm. So intuitively, I invited that woman to the Tara event.
Yeah.
So anyway, we skipped the Tara event, and on the day of the 30th of September 2012, which today is the 30th of September 2019, so it's exactly 7 years later, and as I mentioned, myself and Christine and Charlotte went up to Tara today, and we did so to rectify, I'd suppose.
Yeah.
To put back on track what went off track. So what went off track was really the focus of my event on that day in 2012. It was named the Unification of the Two Lands because that's something in, for example, anybody who knows anything about Egypt and Egyptology, well, Egyptology I'm not particularly into, but anyway, the Unification of the Two Lands generally is known to represent the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, and is represented by the lotus and the papyrus plants. Mm-hmm. And you see the lotus and the papyrus plant being tied together by Hapi, they say, the god of the Nile. So the unification of the two lands really, on a very superficial level, was referring to the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. But on a deeper level, and in terms of the mystery schools, the unification of the two lands was actually referring to the unification of above and below. And that doesn't mean, for example, the stars and the earth, or the sky and the earth, or heaven and earth. It doesn't just mean that. It means the unification of your higher self and your lower self. The unification of what you might call your living self and what you might consider your dead self, or your self that has passed from this 3D realm.
So your multi-dimensional energy.
Well, yeah, I'm just going to say that you might think, how can you be talking about your living self and your dead self? Because you exist in every state, in every dimension.
Exactly.
So you are and you are not at the same time, all the time.
Yes.
If you like.
Yeah.
Or even if you don't like.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless. It operates whether you like it or not.
That's it.
Or whether you actually agree with it or not. Or even if you believe in it or not. Some people will say, oh, I never heard of that before. It can't be true. Well, I'm sorry, but it actually operates regardless of whether you've heard about it
or
before. Or
people who say, like, where did you learn that?
Yeah. Well, anyway. So the unification of the two lands is really a summarization of what the ancient mystery school teachings were. And the ancient mystery school teachings were about realizing that you are, as I mentioned earlier, immortal, ageless, timeless. That you are not a being that has a middle, a beginning, and an end. You don't come. This 3D experience that you're having is not all there is. And that is an extremely important thing. This is why this was always sacred information.
Yeah.
Because only people who think that they can be harmed, that they can be damaged, that they're going to die, that somebody can take something away from them, that somebody can damage them in some way, only those people can be put into fear and can be held in fear.
Yeah, manipulated. Yeah.
Manipulated. People who know they are immortal. People who know that this is not all there is.
Yeah.
This 3D reality is not all there is. People who know that after what we call death, we continue. Our consciousness continues. People who know that cannot be manipulated, cannot be put into fear, and therefore cannot be controlled. So those people today, just as thousands and thousands of years ago, or maybe was it thousands of years ago, because I've talked about this before, maybe all the knowledge that we had wasn't really all that long ago.
Yeah.
Maybe a spell has been cast on everybody to make them think that this all happened thousands and thousands of years ago, and in actual fact it was only quite recently. So that's an idea. So we are powerful beings, and at one time this was a knowledge that was not localized to any one race or any one culture, yeah. Or I was going to say religion, but there was no such thing as religion in this time. When I say in this time, I mean when this knowledge was alive. I'm not talking about linear time.
Yeah.
I'm saying when the 100th monkey principle amount of people would have known this information.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is there always has to be a certain amount of people incarnate in physical form who fully understand this information to keep the gateway open.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If there's not enough people, then the gateway closes and everybody is trapped.
Yeah, in lower dimension. Yeah.
In lower dimensional energy. So there always has to be enough people.
Is that 144 souls or 144,000?
Yeah, 144,000, yeah. And that's a good point, Charlotte. And there is a stone, the casing stone, in the Great Pyramid that represents each one of those souls, 144,000. And the Great Pyramid in the ancient world was known, it had many names, but one of the names was Takut, and Takut means the light. And 144 is half of the speed of light, 288,000 kilometers per second. So 144 is half that. And 144 also, if you add 4 and 4, 8 and 1 is 9, is also the actual code of the whole matrix, if you like. But I'm not going to get into that because...
No, today is about the commemorative event.
Exactly.
So Charlotte and Antoinette and I all
this is highly
in a
advanced.
New commemoration, a new cycle beginning, another 7 years.
But this information is highly advanced and at the same time really simple. So if you can understand that a paradox, everything about the mystery schools is a paradox. Everything is and isn't at the same time. Everything is right and wrong at the same. Okay, that was a bad example. Not right and wrong.
Up and down.
Everything is light and dark at the same time. Everything is left and right at the same time. It's not either or.
Yes.
When you
side to side.
Yeah, you see, in this illusion, we always think we have a choice.
Yes.
We feel it has to be either this or that. It can't be both at the same time. We don't even consider the fact that something can be this and that at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both at the same time. And that's a quantum leap in our own consciousness and in how we can actually perceive ourselves and our own experience and our own reality.
A quantum leap? What is
a quantum leap. A quantum leap is basically when you like, okay, I'll give you a good example. For example, say 200 years ago, everybody was sitting around in candlelight. We didn't even have your average house wouldn't have had electricity.
Oh, yeah.
They would have just had candlelight or oil burning lamps and things like that.
Yeah.
So if you consider from, we'll say 200 years ago, and I'm being generous there, we'll say 200 years ago. If you consider from 200 years ago to now, okay, 200 years ago we didn't even have electricity.
Yeah.
Now we have virtual reality.
Yeah.
We have thought-activated computers.
Yes.
Yeah. And like data, like controlling everything.
Yeah.
I get you.
That's a quantum leap.
Yeah.
In a short space of time.
It just happened really fast, yeah.
Well, if you consider that we're supposed to be around on the planet as Homo sapien for the past, 250,000 years and probably maybe a bit more.
Yeah.
By standard conventional dating, we're supposed to, Homo sapien are around for 250,000 years. And what were we doing for the last 250,000 years? Do you know what I mean? Because up to 200 years ago, we were still sitting in candlelight. Mm-hmm. We might have figured out how to build a few buildings and, the Industrial Revolution and all that business. But, it's nothing compared to where we are now. Yeah, so for, technology. 250,000 years, we were pretty much, so it seems, by conventional standards, doing nothing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in 200 years, we've gone from not even having electricity to...
horses and carts.
Yeah, to virtual reality and brain interface, interactive,
Yeah, so that's what a quantum leap
That's a quantum leap.
All right.
Yeah.
It's a sudden jump in everything. Consciousness and technology.
Yes.
So,
and how does that connect with what we did today?
Well, because that's what we need to do is make a quantum leap. And that's what this science communicates to us. So, I want to mention the Emerald Tablets of Thoth because part of the event that I was running, as I mentioned, the unification of the two lands is about unifying spirit and matter, higher self and lower self, subconscious and conscious, what we call death and life. It's about bringing those what seemingly opposites together.
Yes.
Into a point at which you can understand that it's not this or that, it's both at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, you can see things from your higher self point of view. But all this information from the mystery schools was such that people, I just want to put it in kind of plain language because it can be a bit complicated, but it's actually really simple. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth originated in Atlantis, Ireland, and was brought into Egypt, and at what we would call the fall of Atlantis. Mm-hmm. Those same people went into Egypt, and their story is told in Edfu Temple, and they constructed a plan for all the temples, pyramids, and sacred sites that would be created all over Egypt. In fact, all over the world. And you see, again, the ancestors that connect Egypt to Ireland are the lineage, of course, of Akhenaten and Meritaten, Tutankhamun, Ankhesenamun, that lineage. And at Tara... Teotepi. And at Tara, the Mound of Hostages, which is in 2012, my event was to circle the mound. So what we were to do at that time was to circle the Mound of Hostages. Reason being, what I wanted, what people were to do was to activate the crystalline structure that is their third eye. That is, in fact, we are crystal. We are a crystal.
It's all in our bones and our skeleton.
So to activate the crystalline structure that is the third eye, to set it spinning in all the three axes of the third dimension.
Which is, can you explain
up, down, front, right, left.
There you go.
Sorry, front, back. Up, down, front, back, and right, left, or side to side, if you like.
Side to side.
And they're the three axes of when you begin to draw your flower of life or your seed of life.
Yeah.
So
completely corresponds to sacred geometry.
Yeah, it creates the sphere that exists around,
Yes. Yeah, I get you now.
Yeah.
Because it's very important. Like, people just think it's not what.
So if you set something spinning front and back, and then side to side, and then right to left, okay,
so
what you're going to create is a sphere around
you go
the center point.
Backwards, then up and down, and then side to side.
Yeah,
I get
so you're going to create a sphere.
Yeah, I get you.
And what would that be
all
called?
the geometry that exists are lines of vibration or stress or whatever way you want to look at it within that sphere.
Yes.
All numbers that proceed from zero exist within the zero. They don't exist outside of it and separate to it.
Exactly. Everything is within the circle.
It's within the circle. It's within the zero. Or the zero when you're talking about numbers, the circle when you're talking about shape.
Yes.
And so this language, the Book of Coming Forth by Light, which is inscribed on all temples, mounds, tombs, pyramids, and is also named in Egypt as the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. This information is, and what was used by the ancient mystery school initiates to have what you would call today a near-death experience.
Right.
Now, I personally don't consider what people call it like a near-death experience. I don't call it a near-death experience because it's not a near-death experience. I've had one myself, and it's a death experience.
Yeah.
So it's not near-death.
You are dead.
It's a death experience. You may come back into the same body, and that's what I did. I came back into the same body, but it's still a death experience. You still go through death even though you come back into the same body. And that is exactly what the ancient mystery school initiates were practicing, were learning. Why? Because if you listen to, I won't say everybody, but most people who've had a near-death experience, most people will talk about, there's common denominators, and most people will talk about seeing the light.
Yeah.
And being enveloped in that light. And that light being the most amazing, beautiful light that is actually love. That's unconditional love.
Yes.
But this light also communicates to people telepathically. And anybody who has experienced this light, and we also hear people referring to it as the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And anybody who's had a death experience and come back to tell their story has experienced this light, has always talked about unconditional love, has always talked about all of humanity being one, and that if you harm any part of anything, you're harming yourself. You're harming the whole, which is one. Anybody coming back from that experience has talked about loving all of humanity, loving each other, helping each other, being kind to each other, understanding each other, being compassionate. And so if you can imagine a whole civilization being guided by people who have had that experience, then the civilization of people, okay, maybe the civilization of people, not all of them may have had that experience, a death experience. But those who are guiding the civilization would have had a death experience.
Yeah.
And therefore, ergo, there would never be any war. So the whole civilization would be in balance, would be peaceful,
Yeah.
would be loving, would be caring, would be knowing, most importantly, that this is not all there is.
Yeah.
There would be no attempt to enslave, to manipulate, to control. Because there would be no point. Because nobody could be manipulated or controlled. Yeah. There would be no attempt at starting wars. Because nobody would play your game.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody would join in.
Yeah.
People would know. It's only when you don't know that you can be controlled and manipulated. And even though the mystery schools over time has gotten a bad press, because a lot of people say mystery schools were infiltrated and now the mystery schools are really the Illuminati who control everything and they're the bad guys and they're the elite. Well, yeah, that is true to an extent. The mystery schools were infiltrated. But don't forget, the genuine mystery schools are still there as well.
Of course.
So if you want to focus on the infiltration, then that's where you're at.
Well, that's where that's the experience you're going to get.
But I focus on the genuine teachings of the mystery schools. And the reason I did this event in 2012 was because I knew back then, as I know now, that all the people of Atlantis-Eire need to wake up. Now is the time that we need to wake up. A spell was cast on every single person on this earth, and it is a spell, and everybody is under it.
That's it.
And it's a spell that people don't even know they're under. But there are people who do know. And it may be just niggling in their brain at the moment right now. It may be not something that's come into their conscious awareness right now. But it will. And because it's niggling there, you won't be able to rest easy until you actually do bring it to your conscious awareness. And you know what it is.
Yeah.
And I can tell you what it is. We, and when I say we, I mean we the people of the mystery schools. And we the people of the mystery schools, you can call us the Atlanteans. You can call us mystery school initiates. You can call us, the names were called the Shining Ones.
Yeah, the Tua
we were called by many names.
The Tua, the Irish ones, the Tua de Danann.
Yeah, Druids. By many names all over the world. We were known by, the semi-divine beings in ancient Egypt were called the Shemshu Hor.
That's right. The Shemshu Hor, yeah.
So, this knowledge was known by people and the ancient Egyptian civilization while this knowledge was alive and while civilization was being guided by those who knew we were immortal, who knew this experience wasn't all there is, and who knew that the energy of creation was love, unconditional love, and unity. And those that knew that guided a civilization that lasted for thousands and thousands of years.
Oh, yeah.
And even if the length of time in 3D time wasn't thousands of years, look at the beauty that they produced.
Yeah.
Look at all the beautiful hieroglyphs, the beautiful statues, the art. And even if you look at in ancient Ireland, all the beautiful art that's produced
the symbols and the rock
for example,
art,
in the rock art inside Newgrange, inside Noth. The jewellery. And how did they do all those things as well? Well, of course, they had a science. Once we work in harmony with earth energy, and universal energy. When we work in harmony with it, and by that I mean in terms of what Nikola Tesla was talking about.
Yes.
When we work in harmony with earth energy, then we have unlimited energy. Yeah. Unlimited potential.
Yeah, unlimited resources.
When we work with implosion, not explosion technology, we have unlimited energy at our fingertips. But unfortunately, the whole idea of Atlantis and the fall of Atlantis was the fall of a consciousness, of a knowing, of a group of people that knew this knowledge and this information. Now, in 2012, the 30th December 2012, I came to Ireland to reactivate the Mound of Hostages, to reactivate the communal memory of Irish people, and not just Irish people in Ireland, but Irish people all over the world, of which there are millions.
Yes.
And it's to those people that I want to say, wake up. And remember who you are. Because you are the wisdom keepers. You are the ones who literally have this information written in your DNA. This information communicates to your DNA. And that's why it was left in such a way that it's literally left all over the world. It's left holographically. So in just one symbol, all this information is contained. But at the same time, it's contained in all the symbols, all the glyphs, all the hieroglyphs, in all the sites all over the world as well. So it's a really highly advanced information, and we are the keepers of that knowledge. And we need to activate our memory so that we can communicate this information to other people. I mean, everybody on the earth needs this information right now. Everybody needs to activate this information, to remember this information, I mean, we all know that society and civilizations are being driven by an energy that is not
not compatible with unification.
It's not for the highest good of people.
Yeah.
The driving energy of social experiments, if you like.
Yes.
Which is banking is a social experiment.
It is, yes.
Our health system is a social experiment. Education is a social experiment.
You mean programming?
Yeah. And not just in Ireland. I'm not talking about just in Ireland or just in Egypt. I'm talking about all over the world. And the energy of those who are
music is
pumping this agenda out, if you like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pumping this agenda out. They're the infiltrators. They're the ones who infiltrated. So if you're looking for the infiltrators of the mystery schools, that's them.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are pumping this agenda out. And not to tar with the same brush, but visually, they're 99.9% of the time men in suits. You know, there are women, of course, in this arena, you know. But the energy of those women is very masculine, if you like.
Yeah.
But predominantly, it's a patriarchal society that we're in now. And it's been driven by psychopaths.
Oh, absolutely.
Those
no
who are...
empathy, no love, no. It's alignment and manipulation.
Absolutely.
And programming.
And those people who are now running the world, if you like, if you want to put it that way, who own all the land and property and wealth, and to whom we basically are slaves.
Oh, debt slaves, absolutely.
Those people have, as you mentioned, absolutely no empathy. They don't consider themselves as part of a humanity, if you like.
No, it's 1%.
They consider themselves apart from that, and we are just useless. You know, I mean, the only reason we're there is to keep them in their comfort. Yeah. You know. So, if you want to see the infiltrators, if you like, of the ancient mystery schools, that's them, the elite, the Illuminati. They're the ones who infiltrated this information. They know all the information from the mystery schools. They know what people have discovered when they've had death experiences and come back to tell their story. They know what the mystery school initiates knew.
Basically is.
And they're using it. They're using this information and this language against people. And the language is still, as it always was, a language of symbols.
Yeah.
It's a language of... And just to give you a brief example of what I mean, if you look at everything like corporate logos, symbols on cars, symbols on football jerseys, symbols on training like runners and, you know, labels, designer labels, like it's all communicating information to you on a subconscious level that you personally don't...
Your conscious self isn't even aware
Your conscious self is not aware of it. It communicates... on a subconscious level.
Yeah, but and that goes back to a thing we've discussed before, which is that these symbols go directly into your right brain, which literally is like a tip of an iceberg. It's always on. It never turns off. So it's always collecting this information. Your
feminine energy only understands symbols, images, shapes, forms, feelings. Emotions. It doesn't understand language. Any language, English, Irish, Japanese, French, it doesn't understand any language as it's spoken, as we speak it now. It doesn't understand that. It's a lower form of communication.
Yes.
Symbols are a form of communication that closely resemble what you might call a meme, which means that an entire body of information is delivered into your conscious mind or subconscious mind and then slowly trickles into the conscious mind. But it's done so, it's delivered into the mind in such a way that it's done in one go. It's not like reading a book.
Yeah.
That takes a period of time.
Yes.
It's literally delivered into your mind in one go.
Yes.
In its entirety.
For myself as an artist, when I found out this kind of information years ago, it's just fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And, the man who founded Madison Avenue and they all know this information.
Oh, yeah.
And it is being constantly used. In fact, even more so now, since I grew up in the 60s and 70s, like even more so now than ever before. Like I see things on television being edited at like an amazingly phenomenal fast rate. Not like when I was watching TV in little, but I mean swift edits. And you think, is it getting in? Oh, yeah. Even in that little bit of a clip that you're seeing it, that symbol is going in. It's like, it's hyper, like you're absorbing all this information.
Absolutely. I mean, well, those people that are controlling, society, if you want to say, civilization today, are those people who, as you mentioned, know all this information and know how to use it.
Yes.
Against the general public. And that it's in itself actually is kind of brings you back to ancient Egypt, because this is where in after Atlantis, after the fall of Atlantis, if you like, this is where this information really became at its lowest and most degraded and most based form.
The mound builders who went to survived Atlantis and went to Egypt.
Exactly. So those mound builders left the area of Atlantis, which would have been Ireland, England and Northern Europe, all those land masses combined.
Yeah.
So it's all those land masses that would have been known as Atlantis. And when all those land masses separated and broke up, the people moved to the area that we would now know as Egypt, and carried out their plan of constructing the sites and finding a new centre of the earth there in Egypt. But we are those people. And what we need to do now is to wake up and to help people that are not as far along on the remembering line, if you like.
So like activate our own DNA, and that would be like an antenna broadcasting a frequency.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that frequency would be like the 100th monkey. If enough, the 144,000 are awake, the information is in the ethers.
Yeah,
like all around the earth.
Yeah, it's transmitted through the morphic fields that we spoke about before.
Yeah, the morphogenic fields, yes.
Once the 100 monkey principle, once a certain amount of people know this, then it's automatically transmitted then to the rest of the population by default.
Yes, and this is the reason why churches were built on ley lines, and because they're basically there. So we were up on the Mount of Hostages today. We were standing on a very powerful ley line, connected directly, a link between Egypt and Ireland, because of the information that we know in terms of the family that were buried at that spot, because it was an important spot.
Yeah, and Tefi and the Tara Prince. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And they were connected by DNA and jewelry, right? Facing jewelry to the lineage of Akhenaten and Tutankhamun.
The faience beads, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's when I was doing that event in 2012, the idea was to circle the Mound of Hostages.
Yes.
Because, as you mentioned, the Tara Prince and how it was identified by the jewellery that was placed on the body, and it was a process of making beads called faience that was only practiced in Egypt.
Correct.
And as well as that...
a distinctive turquoise blue-like colour. Beautiful.
Yeah, they used plant and mineral extract, and when they were analysed, they were found to be plant and mineral extract that only came from Egypt. So how did they get under the Mound of Hostages, Anyway, so Tefi, who it's said is buried under the Mound of Hostages, and the Tara Prince, who is said is her son.
Yes.
And both are connected to the family of Akhenaten and that lineage. And also there is the Ark of the Covenant that's at Tara as well. Now, I'm not going to get into the Ark of the Covenant being, is it a physical object or is it not a physical object? Maybe at one time it was a physical object, but when I refer to the Ark of the Covenant, I'm referring to information, and yes, it is at Tara. But it's also at all the other sites as well.
Yeah. Because they're holograms.
It's a hologram, yeah.
Part of a grid, right?
Yeah, it's information. The Ark of the Covenant is information, but that's not to say that at one point there wasn't something
object,
physical.
Yes.
That may still well be underneath the Mound of Hostages, and I know a lot of people do think that there is
well, the new
something physical under the Mound of
The new
Hostages.
Israelites were seriously
and the
looking
Israelites
for it under
in
the
the
wrath of
70s,
sentence, yes.
yeah, came to
In the 1910s
Tara
and
and
20s.
dug up quite a lot there because they were so convinced that the Ark of the Covenant was there.
Because it says so in their ancient texts.
Yes, yeah,
Their
exactly.
secret, what would you say? I forget the Jewish religion, Kabbalah. Kabbalah text.
Kabbalah, yeah. And that's a good point, actually. If you look at all religions, as I mentioned, this information that was carried into ancient Egypt and was Egypt's legacy, if you like. I mean, the ancient Egyptians themselves are the story of Atlantis, as told by Plato, is a story from an Egyptian priest telling of their ancient ancestors, the Atlanteans.
Solon.
And so their ancient ancestors, the Atlanteans, were the ancient Irish, those of Ireland, England, Northern Europe, the Atlantean continents, as I just mentioned before all those continents broke up. And so we are one people. Those people who knew this information were one people. I say Irish people, okay, because at one time, as I mentioned, the power centre would have been at Tara.
Of course, yeah.
But really, it's not any race of people. What makes these people, what the connection between all these people is their knowledge, what they know. And when I say these people, I mean Atlanteans, if you want to call them that, or mystery school initiates. So, as I mentioned, the idea of my event in 2012 was to connect the Stargate portal that exists and the lineage, the family lineage, and the knowledge of the people. I refer to are, of course, the mystery school initiates or students or masters, because we're all students, initiates and masters rolled into one. So it's all of those people who are still alive and incarnate today that need to remember who they are. And they're the people that I'm talking to. They're the people that I'm calling on now. And they're the people that I'm directly communicating to tell them that they can remember their information. This information is left literally written inside all the tombs. And people gravitate towards all the tombs and sacred sites and temples in countries all over the world, like Ireland, Egypt, India, South America.
Yeah, Central America, Native Americans.
And for the most part, people don't actually really understand why they're gravitating there.
Yes.
They go and they see it and they don't fully understand why, But this is the reason why, because whether you consciously understand a hieroglyph on the wall or a symbol that you might see in somewhere in a sacred mound or a place in Ireland, you might not understand the symbol, but it's still communicating to an aspect of you that does understand it.
Exactly.
And so to begin to understand these symbols and what connects all the ancient religions, if you like, and how this ancient information was broken and how the spell was cast, was done back in ancient Egypt. And it's a long story and it's quite convoluted, if you like, but it was the priesthood of Amun who broke this order and who decided, and when I say order, I mean order of the universe, the balance, if you like, and who decided
universal order, the laws of nature,
and who decided to keep this information for themselves, to keep the information away from the people, to have people worshipping idols, in other words, statues. What they did was they had people worship the symbol rather than
activating their own symbol.
Rather than the people having the knowledge of the symbol. What they did was they had them worshipping the symbols, and they turned symbols into statues and so
into
on.
An industry for themselves.
Yeah. So, and one of the things as well that connects all religions is that all religions at the end of prayer say Amen. And that's connected to the Amen priesthood. And the Amen priesthood are, when I say priesthood, it doesn't mean that they're priests, Back in ancient Egypt, they may have dressed like priests and looked like priests. But now the Amun priesthood wear suits and ties.
Of course. Yeah.
And run corporations and governments. They're also still involved in religion, but they're also involved in running banks and corporations and governments and health systems.
Because they all came from the priesthood. So, just in the modern day, they're highly specialized.
Absolutely. So, So this ancient information and these ancient people that I'm talking about and people who know this information have always been a threat to the status quo, to the people who are pushing or driving civilization towards destruction, really. You know,
it's basically a case of keeping everyone disconnected from their own like higher consciousness DNA and keeping everybody connected to a like stratified system, like a hierarchy, whereas it's supposed to be a unity where everybody is equal because
exactly.
There's nobody higher than anyone else.
Exactly, yeah. The difference between a network and a hierarchy, yeah.
Exactly.
In a network, the center is everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
That's it. And it's fluid. It
in
moves.
a hierarchy, there's an absolute center.
Yes. It's very male, like left brain.
Yeah,
like
there's a top, a middle, and a bottom.
Yeah. And also, can I just mention, we had a little spirit animal with us at the Mount of Hostages. It was this lovely little spider. And Antoinette, it came to her on her side of the stone. So I said, that's our spiritual animal, so I'll mention it. Because of the web.
Weaving the web, yeah.
Yeah, weaving the web, and the morphogenic field is a web as well.
So the reason we were there today was because my event in 2012 was actually...
hijacked.
It was derailed, if you like, sent off track. And it was sent off track by that woman who I mentioned earlier that emailed me saying that her husband told her that there was a woman in Egypt who had information and who was key to Egypt and Ireland. And that's why I invited the woman to the Tara event. But as it turned out, when we went up to Tara on that day, the Mound of Hostages was surrounded by scaffolding. Yeah. And my event was that all the people were going to hold hands around the mound. And what we were to do was to activate the crystalline third eye DNA, the crystalline third eye, activate the crystalline structure that exists underneath the Mound of Hostages, and activate the crystalline structure that exists underneath the Giza Plateau, underneath the Great Pyramid at the Giza Plateau, and connect those things, those three things. So everybody in the group basically was connecting their third eye to, and your third eye again is a crystal, it's a stargate, it's a portal.
Piezoelectric, yeah.
So everybody in the group was to connect their third eye, activate it, set it spinning in all the three directions of the third dimension, as we mentioned previously, and set it spinning faster than the speed of light. And we were to activate the crystal under the Mound of Hostages and set it spinning in the three directions and faster than the speed of light. And the same with the crystal that exists underneath the Giza Plateau. And again, activate that in the three directions and faster than the speed of light. And in that way, what we were doing was we were unifying the two lands of ancient Ireland and ancient Egypt and connecting those ancient people that had previously gone into Egypt. So connecting that lineage once again, activating and awakening it. And through the morphic fields, as we mentioned, spreading that information, even though there was only approximately 40 people of us that day on the mound, we could spread that information through the morphic field to all our
when all the people
brothers
disperse,
and sisters,
they go back wherever they are. They're on another spot on the surface of the earth.
Yeah. But what happened was the woman that I invited began, as we got up to the Mound of Hostages, I realised that we couldn't actually hold hands around the Mound of Hostages because there was a scaffold there. So what we had to do was we had to go onto the mound next to it, which is the one that has the so-called Leah Fall. So we all stood on that mound, we held hands, and I began to ask people to visualise the Stargate at Giza, to visualise. And as I was talking, this woman said to me, oh, sorry, would you mind if I said something? I said, no, go ahead. And she began to talk about St. Patrick and the curse of St. Patrick at Tara, and how all the Catholic Church was going to burn, and how the Pope was going to burn. And then she asked everybody if they wanted to renounce their
baptismal vows,
their communion vows, and their confirmation vows. And before I realised it, my event had turned into a whole thing about the Catholic Church and about the curse of St. Patrick and the curse of Tara and the curse of this and that and the other. And it was nothing to what I had
intended.
No. My event was to open the Stargate portals that existed at Tara, at Giza, and to build a bridge to connect those two ancient sacred sites, but not just the ancient sacred sites, the people, and to activate their memory and to wake them up so that we can remember who we are, so that we can take back control, and so that we don't have to live in fear, enslavement, and manipulation. That was the focus of my event, but it was derailed. So what happened, in a way, it was my fault as well, because I allowed it to happen. I could have stopped it, but I allowed it to happen. I think I was in shock, actually, as well, that this person had done what she did. So it carried on that we left Tara and we went back to the venue that we were having the event, and it really the whole event just escaped me from there on in. And to all the people that were there, if anybody does happen to listen to this podcast, I actually never received the list of everybody's emails that was there that day.
She even took that list.
The list, I don't know what happened to the list, but the list disappeared. I never got everybody's email address, and therefore I could never contact anybody. There was 1 or 2 people that contacted me after that event, but most people I could never contact again after that, because I had no details for them. The organisers had the details, and I don't know where the everybody's email address went, but I didn't have it.
Meant to be.
Yeah, so
I feel it wasn't the right time.
So just for I mean, any of those people that are listening, you might be interested to know that what happened was that same woman was actually, I discovered in 2014, and I happened to be back in Ireland again at that time, and I discovered that same woman was going to be again at Tara and was doing something else at Tara. So myself and Christine went up.
We did.
That time in 2014, because
May 26th.
One of the other main things I was doing at that event at Tara in 2012 was something from the Book of Coming Forth by Light, which is called Opening the 7 Arets, or the 7 Portals, or the
Doors.
7 Seals.
Yeah, 7 seals, that's right, yes.
And the 7 Seals also has to do with our main 7 chakra, if you like. And so opening the 7 portals was another big part of the event that day. But as I said, my event was sidetracked on Tara almost from the beginning, so I never got a chance to do everything that I wanted to do. So myself and Christine went back up in 2014, and we not completed, but we did a lot more. I did a lot more of what, and Christine did a lot more of what we were meant to do on that day, in the 30th of September 2012. And the next day, in 2014, we went on to the Hill of Ward, which is also known as Clacta. And as we were driving around, I was reading from the Book of Coming Forth by Light, which I would say words from the Book of Coming Forth by Light has not been spoken aloud in Ireland in, I don't know, but I'd say, maybe thousands of years. And so it was very powerful. But myself and Christine were driving around the Hill of Ward, and when we eventually got onto the Hill of Ward, I was reading out the opening of the 7 portals from the Book of Coming Forth by Light. And when we walked onto the Hill of Ward, lo and behold, for the first time ever, the Hill of Ward was being excavated. And as we walked onto the land, of course, the first thing we saw was all these portals opened up in the ground.
They were cut
7 portals opened up into the ground.
So that sacred land was exposed to the air for the first time in
thousands of years. It had never been excavated.
It was being activated physically.
That was the thing.
So the man who actually arranged that excavation at the Hill of Ward, his name was John Gilroy, came to myself and Christine that day, and he asked us, "Oh my God, did you see what happened at Tara yesterday?" Which was the day in 2014 that myself and Christine had gone up to try and finish what I had tried to do in 2012. And what we discovered was that later on in the day that myself and Christine had been there, some people had come up and thrown red and green paint all over the Leah Fall.
So they defaced this powerful standing stone.
Yeah, which was kind of mind-boggling as to why anybody would do that, but they did. So
so basically, it was immediately some sort of reaction happened. Really, by the nightfall from the day we were up there.
Yeah.
Because we had done
And that woman was there that day as well.
Yeah,
at the same
exactly.
day.
So, but when we were doing that, because I have photographs of it, we put our crystals on top of the Leofal. And then by the night, someone had spread paint all over it. So we had activated the Leofal and directly connected it to Egypt. And the other thing that happened on that day, Antoinette, of significance...
Was the elections,
The elections. The first elections after the Arab Spring
That was,
rioting.
that was the 26th of May.
26th of May.
2014. And without realising it or without planning it, it was actually the elections for when they were electing in the President Mohamed Morsi. It was happening on the same day in 2014 that myself and Christine went up there, and it was because of that lady that was there on that day in 2014. We didn't actually plan.
No, we were just catalysed.
We just realised at the day that the elections were on in Egypt. So that brings me to today, because today is the 30th of September 2019, and it's exactly 7 years from that event that I did in 2012. And even though myself and Christine went back in 2014, I still hadn't completed, if you like, what I started out to do in 2012. So 7 years later, which is not surprising because what the focus of my event was, opening the 7 portals, or the 7 seals. So 7 years later, we went up today, 30th of September.
Myself,
sorry.
Antoinette, and Charlotte.
Yes, and we completed the opening of and the activation of the Stargate portals that exist between Giza and Tara, or if you like, between Egypt and Ireland. And as I mentioned earlier, those are symbolic. The opening of those portals and the connecting of those portals are symbolic of the unification of the two lands, which is the opening and connecting of above and below, of what we call life and death, of what we call conscious and subconscious, of what we call lower self and higher self. It's the reconciling of all paradoxes. It represents the unification of the two lands, and what we completed today, connecting Egypt and Ireland and the Stargate portals, represents the unification and the reconciliation of all paradoxes. Everything that appears to be opposite can be rectified or reconciled at a point of balance.
And it was just the equinox as well.
And it's in that point, in that centre point of balance that creates the quantum leap. When you are in that centre point of balance, that's where you take a quantum leap. Because now you're seeing both sides at the same time. You're not just seeing one side. It's like being on a seesaw.
Yeah, it's when you're level.
If you're on one side of the seesaw, you're always seeing up or down, you know. And it doesn't matter which side of the seesaw you're on. You're always going to be up and the other person will be down. And then when you're down, the other person's up. And when you're up, the other person's down. But at the centre stays the same.
It's like,
and therefore the centre has the balance of both.
And is that not the vortex point?
Yeah. So the centre represents the vortex point, as Christine mentioned. In
your Taurus.
In your Taurus.
Field. Can I ask a question just to interrupt you for a minute? September 30th, 2012. So then on December 21st, 2012, where were you?
At the Giza Plateau.
So there you go.
But that's a whole different story.
I know, but I'm just saying, just to let you know, there's another podcast.
So, what I want to say is that what unifies all religions is geometry. Now, that might not seem on the face of it like it does, but it does. So, if you look at, like, for example, Islam, in Islam, no drawing can be made of Allah or Muhammad or anything. So, what is used instead is to portray the sacred nature of God or Allah is Islamic art, which is all based on sacred geometry. If you look at Christianity and Catholicism, it's all based on, for example, the cathedrals, which are all to do with sacred geometry, and even the cross or the crucifix itself is to do with sacred geometry. And if we look at Judaism is all based on
the tree of
sacred
life.
Geometry, the Kabbalah, the tree of life, exactly. So geometry is one thing that connects
everything.
All religion. Religion is a creation of the M1 priesthood, and religion is designed to manipulate and enslave, to keep this information away from people.
Well, the Druids, they studied nature, harmony
and so,
of nature, right?
The symbols that are inside the sites and the sites themselves are a language that communicates and broadcasts this information to the subconscious. And it then slowly integrates into the conscious mind, where the person then slowly, through visions, through dreams, through senses, through feelings, slowly and at the right time, becomes aware of its own higher self, of its own higher power, of its own immortality.
Yes.
And incrementally, bit by bit, realizes, here, I'm not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I be afraid?
Yes.
Nobody can harm me.
Hierarchy.
That there's no hierarchy.
You're all equal, right?
That everything is equal. Mm-hmm. That there's nothing can harm you. That all the...
Because you don't go anywhere.
Things that apparently can jump out of the dark and harm you are all just imaginary.
Fantasies.
Imaginary.
Illusions.
And they're not even your imagination.
Right. It's somebody else putting
It's
the image
somebody
in your
else
head.
putting it in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because left to yourself, you would never imagine all that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your imagination.
Yes.
So, by meeting Delores, I actually got one of my keys, which I've gotten over the years. And one of the keys that I received from Delores was the ability to be able to work with people using quantum healing hypnosis technique, which is the technique that Delores developed.
Which I myself have had an amazing session privately with Antoinette. I've never done anything like that. It was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And so the quantum healing hypnosis technique works kind of in two ways. Number one, without getting into too many details, when we work with this quantum healing technique, what we do is we bring the person through the death experience.
Yeah.
So they actually have a death experience, and this is what the Mystery Skull initiates were doing. This is the sacred information of the Mystery Skulls.
Yeah. Overcoming the fear of death in every chakra.
Going through the death experience consciously. Mm-hmm. And that is what we do when we work with people in the quantum healing. Mm. And the other aspect of the quantum healing technique is that we go through a past life. Yeah. So there's two things there. The person remembers the past life, and they also remember the death experience.
Emotions and feelings of the
they
past
remember
life
the
too.
Death experience.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, yeah, and the emotions and experience.
The past death experience, or like you're going through a death experience?
They remember the past life death experience.
Okay.
But when the person leaves the body in that experience, then they move out into the level where people experience the light when they're having a death experience. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they'll remember the death experience of the past life they're remembering.
Yes, it's not them from right now, but it's this knowledge they've acquired.
As soon as the consciousness steps out of the body.
Yeah.
In the past life regression.
Yes.
As soon as I guide the consciousness to step out of the body that's dying, then they realize that
that's not who they are.
That's not who they are. So that death experience then becomes the death experience that they've had in every lifetime.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In fact, you
as
don't
soon
remember
as you step
Charlotte's
out of the body,
ego. It's Charlotte's over consciousness, right? Like, so then you're like, oh, I was that person, but that's not who I am, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very fascinating. And Delores Cannon's work is amazing in that whole area.
Yeah. So that quantum healing that I've used is there as a key to integrate and activate this information as well. So
can I mention one thing, which is I really enjoyed, was I've taken your sacred geometry class 2 or 3 times. So that for me, like I had an experience of, I did sacred geometry with Antoinette, and because we're friends, I told her I immediately within 2 weeks had an amazing experience of seeing 3 pillars of green light, like emerald green light. And so I would recommend to you that, because I'm so visual, the sacred geometry unlocked information for me right away, like amazingly.
Absolutely,
so that's my testimony.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. The sacred geometry is the activation, and as you rightly said, Christine, when you do a workshop, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with me, whoever you do it with, as long as they know what they're talking about, when you start to understand the geometry, when you start to work with it, when you start to see how the whole symbol is built up from one dot, all the way up to what we call Metatron's cube, and when you understand that, understand how it relates to the creation of matter, and the creation of your physical illusion that you call your reality
in the hologram,
then you begin to understand how you are the creator.
Exactly.
How we are all the creator. It's the most powerful the most empowering information that you can have, and that's why it has always been dangerous. And it's still sacred. It's still as powerful and empowering today, and it's what is going to save this planet.
Yes.
There's nothing. No violent revolutions. No wars.
It's love.
No
and unity.
People going out onto the streets fighting against the status quo, fighting against the powers that be. None of that. It's the only thing that's going to break this spell is the awareness of the people. The only thing that's going to break this spell is when people in their hundreds of thousands say, I remember.
Yeah, I remember. Exactly.
I remember who I am.
I remember
that I am immortal.
Yes.
I remember that I'm the creator. So why are you telling me what to do?
Yeah.
Why are you trying to tell me that I'm going to die, that I'm going to cease to exist, and if I don't do what my religion tells me, that I'm going to burn in hell? Why? It's to keep control. It's to keep people
your
under
consciousness
control.
trapped.
And we could change everything in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye. Once we come together, remember this information, we can change the whole world and how it's run in the blink of an eye. So just the last thing I want to say about Tara, for example, just to give you an idea. The word Tara the etymology of the word comes from Torah, which is the Jewish book of the law, written by Moses. And I've spoke before about how Akhenaten was Moses. And Taurus, the Taurus.
The energy field, your light body.
Which is
your Taurus.
Which is your sphere of energy that surrounds not just every person, but everything. It's the energy field that surrounds everything. The Taurus. So, on that note, I think we'll leave it for today. Mm-hmm. And we did take some pictures. I did a drawing, a geometry drawing of Metatron's cube.
A beautiful drawing, which you can see.
Which we placed inside the mound. And I have done that each time I've gone up.
That's right, all 3 times, so this is the 3rd time.
Mm-hmm. So in 2012, in 2014, and 2019. Today, 2019, 30th of September 2019. And so there's a picture of that drawing that I put inside the mound. And I leave some pictures of the original event that I had on the 30th of September 2012. And we may just get some pictures from,
new ones from
2014 when myself and you were there, Christine, as well. And the geometry drawing that we put in there at that time as well.
What a powerful day that was.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly powerful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The energy on the hill was just still as if you were in a conservatory or something, like a bubble of energy all over the bound, which, if anyone knows the Hill of Tara, is often quite windy.
Yeah, oh yeah. And today as well, I thought was amazing.
It was
very still, especially when we activated and connected Ireland and Egypt, or Tara and Giza, and entered what we would call the halls of Amenti.
Yes.
Because it's beneath all these ancient sites that the Hall of Records are. You know, people think the Hall of Records only exists underneath the Giza Plateau.
No, it's worldwide.
There's a Hall of Records underneath every ancient site, all over the world.
Yes.
And so I'm very happy to have completed that cycle that I started on the 30th of September 2012, thanks to
a new one.
Christine and Charlotte, who helped me today.
Woohoo!
So, thank you, everybody. And if anybody has any questions, you can email me. As I said, we'll leave pictures, etc. I'll leave not the pictures, but a link to the pictures
in the description box.
Yeah.
And I will say myself, this is a really amazing time of year in ancient Ireland, because we're coming up to what all of you know as Halloween, but the Irish and the Druids called it Samhain. Celtic New Year. It's like extremely powerful time of year for multidimensionality, because the veils are thin. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that we might do something about that, a podcast on that very subject.
Yeah,
Watch this space.
Watch this space. And the whole of, as Christine mentioned, Halloween originates from the place that we discussed earlier, which is the Hill of Ward, or Collecta. And
which is an amazingly mysterious, cool place.
And yeah, exactly. And if you think of the symbol of the Olympics, the interconnecting circles, and the geometry of the seed of life and the flower of life, it'll give you an indication. So That'll be a good one actually for our next
one.
podcast.
Because I think at the time of the year, I just feel
the Hill
since we
Award.
mentioned it so much here that we could put some pictures up of the excavation, because there was a subsequent excavation on the Hill of Ward, which I also, Antoinette, well, I went for sure, and I know Antoinette went, I think.
Yeah.
And we have more pictures of that, and there was some astounding discovery at that time.
Made,
Yeah.
So again, watch this space.
Watch this space.
Okay, Charlotte, we're going to go now,
So
and
say-
thank you to everybody.
How do we say goodbye in Irish?
Slán leat.
Slán
Slán leat.
All right.
Slán leat.
All right.
Lash.
Woohoo!